You ever wish you could walk through the old Yankee Stadium before the crowds got there to get a little taste of what it was like behind the scenes? Down the ramps, the hallways. Well, now you can. I'm Stewart J, Zully, and in my life in Yankee Stadium, 40 years as a vendor, and other tales of growing up somewhat sane in the Bronx, you get an inside look at a baseball monument. For 2,500 events, I sold everything. Beer, hot dogs, whatever.
Hey, peanuts here. Get your peanuts.
World Series games, a Muhammad Ali fight. Hey, I was even there when the Pope showed up.
Hey, rosary beads here. Rosary beads.
My life in Yankee Stadium. 40 years as a vendor. And other tales of growing up somewhat sane in the Bronx.
Hey, beer here. Cold beer.
"50 years ago, in 1970, I started working at Yankee Stadium, where I was a vendor for over 2,500 events. It's all right here in my memoir, My Life in Yankee Stadium. 40 years as a vendor and other tales of growing up somewhat sane in the Bronx. I sold everything from peanuts to hot chocolate, Cracker Jacks, ice cream, hot dogs, beer with my giant can opener, and in later years, souvenirs. And thanks to Todd, I would like to share a few stories with you here today.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Yankee Stadium.
Now, oftentimes the Yankee fans in a section take on a personality of their own, and the crowd in the Bronx bleachers was, and still is, like no other. Over the years, they have come to be known as the Bleacher Creatures, and for good reason. They still are a core group of about 40 or 50, and they have rarely missed a single game. Whenever the Yankees take the field for a home game, the Creatures cheer for each position player, one at a time, in a roll call. The tradition continued into the new ballpark, as when Derek Jeter got the shout out.
Now batting for the Yankees, number 2, Derek Jeter.
Derek Jeter, Derek Jeter. A-Rod, A-Rod. The Creatures go right on through the whole lineup, calling out each player in the field during the opening minutes of the first inning. And the cheer continues until the player being lauded flicks his cap, waves, or acknowledges them somehow. Since 1996, it's become a tradition at the ballpark. Now, though the Creatures are a boisterous lot, they have their own rules. Back when the dance-along song, the Macarena, was popular, it was played with the fans in the stands up on their feet and moving to the beat. Needless to say, the Creatures, traditionalists all the way, would have no part of it. They also abhor the wave. With many tourists in attendance at games, it's become common for the fans to unite and get involved with this section-by-section cheer, but the Bleacher Creatures remain defiant. Even when the whole ballpark participates and every level of the stadium rises and sits in unison like a large wave, the Bleacher fans stay seated when it becomes their turn, often causing boos to cascade upon them. They are a principled lot, and their refusal to participate implies, if you people want to wave, go back where you came from and wave all you want. Though the sale of beer was forbidden in the bleachers during the final few seasons at the old ballpark, sobriety didn't stop the creatures from being rowdy. I often heard them yelling to other sections, "Box seats suck! Box seats suck!" One night, the fans in the box seats answered them with a, "Get a job! Get a job!" Man, I miss New York. Throughout its history, a number of events have taken place in the ballpark, including prize fights, college football games, and religious gatherings. My dad, who worked there in the 30s and once sold Babe Ruth 6 hot dogs before a game, told me many times of the intense rivalries between Army, Navy, and Notre Dame. He also told me that his brother, my Uncle Abe, worked there for a time, and even during my tenure, I helped get 2 of my nephews in when they were teenagers. But no one in my family hung in there nearly as long as I did. Cash was tight when my dad worked back in the 30s, and he used to tell me if the scorecard he was selling was 3 cents and someone in the middle of the row would buy one with a dime, Dad sometimes gave back only 6 cents change. That way, if an exciting play was occurring at that very moment, the fan might mindlessly put the change in his pocket and my dad would scurry off with the extra cent. But if the fan began to count his change, Dad would quickly send that extra penny down the row. Life for a post-Depression era kid, I suppose. I would often think of him whenever I'd get past a $10 bill from a row of people for a $9 beer. I would slowly prepare to pass the single as I looked for a sign from the customer to keep it. I didn't hold back the money like he did, but times change. He waited on pennies, me on dollar bills. I worked other events such as rock concerts featuring Pink Floyd, Billy Joel, and U2. Aside from t-shirts and hats, I recall selling condoms for the U2 concert. "Hey, condoms here, get your condoms." In 1979, I had the honor to work when Pope John Paul II came to celebrate Mass. That day, I had souvenirs and sold all sorts of items like photos, pennants, t-shirts. My stand was in the upper deck, and I came out to the seats for a moment so I could catch a glimpse of the Pope down on the field while a security guard kept an eye on my inventory. I will never forget how quiet it was. More than 50,000 people perfectly still during the ceremony. I'd been at the stadium for nearly 10 years by that point, so I was used to hearing loud cheering and screaming, but I'd never been there when it was so eerily silent. The next day, the Pope, after speaking at the United Nations, went to Queens and visited Shea Stadium, home of the Mets. Fellow vendors who worked both ballparks often spoke of the fact that there were torrential rains all that day, which threatened to completely ruin the event. But as those who attended his Mass at Shea have sworn to, when the Pope-mobile came on the field, the rain stopped. The sun subsequently came out as His Holiness hit the stage. Being Jewish, I was nervous at the Pope's visit to the Bronx, wanting to say the right thing in the right way to the various nuns and priests at the event. As they passed by my stand in the hallway, I was on my very best behavior. But I always tell my friends about how I broke the ice after the first solemn hour by yelling out, "Hey, rosary beads here, rosary beads. No pushing. One at a time, sister." I didn't say that last part. U2, the Pope, I guess business is business. In 2008, the final year of the old stadium, Pope Benedict came to conduct Mass, but unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to vend. In the 21st century, the Pope brings in his own souvenirs and his own vendors. I guess the papal business has become big business. The city graciously welcomed him all around town, but I had to laugh when I was driving on the Harlem River Drive and I saw a traffic sign posted that read, "Pope visit at Yankee Stadium, use mass transportation." Visits from the Pope, football games and concerts aside, it was ultimately baseball that was the focus of my 40 summers at the stadium. Every Memorial Day, 4th of July, and Labor Day weekend, for all those years, if the Yanks were home, I was there, vending to thousands and thousands of fans. And over time, I've come to realize that Lou Gehrig, Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle, and Derek Jeter all played their entire careers as Yankees, but not one of them worked as many games in the Bronx as I did.
MVP.
Now, having worked more than 2,500 events at Yankee Stadium, I can say most of the games were usually routine with the occasional pitcher's duel here and a few back-to-back triples there. However, some nights were different from others. For instance, I was there when Chris Chambliss hit his penny-winning home run in 1976 against the Kansas City Royals. The field was so swarmed with fans that after the blast, Chambliss had to return to the field from the locker room to touch home plate in front of an umpire. I remember the thrill of Yogi coming home after having been exiled by George Steinbrenner for more than 14 years. I saw various no-hitters, over 20 old-timers games, the gay games in '94 celebrating gay athletes, Charlie Hayes smothering a pop-up to clinch the '96 championship, Aaron Boone's dramatic home run of the Red Sox in 2003, among so many others. Another day I won't forget was August 3rd, 1979, the day after Thurman Munson was killed in a plane crash in Toledo, Ohio. Munson had been a hero of mine, a gritty ball player who did whatever he could to avoid the spotlight in New York, often flying home to Ohio to be with his family on his off days. During a moment of silence for the Yankee captain, I watched Lou Piniella break down in tears in left field from my station near section 20 in the lower deck. I actually couldn't finish work that game because I was so shaken over his tragic death. My diary from that mournful time read, "He was fat, he was not very good looking, he didn't play up to the press, but he tried. Boy, did he try." I could still see him stretching from first to third on a single to center and belly whopping into the bag, invariably safe. I related to Thurman. I had been a catcher in Little League. I was chunky. I played tough. And I too was pretty ugly. I always took Thurm's side in arguments, and somehow I could feel what he was going through in that Yankee dugout, sensing his fear and dislike for Reggie Jackson. I understood Thurman Munson's terribly private ordeal, trying to simply play ball without wanting to be on the cover of a magazine, avoiding the fanfare in a town that breathes glamour and ignores dedication. His death signifies to me how difficult life really is, how hard it is to do what you want, to love and maintain your family, and still do your job. The American dream drags onward. Some nights were memorable for other reasons, such as when I sang Johnny Be Good to a whole section in the upper deck and managed to get them all up on their feet to do a sing-along. Now that was fun, hearing them do Chuck Berry's hit, but the incident got me suspended for 3 games. Curious thing was, at around the same time, another vendor had stolen a key to the peanut storage room, and he also was docked 3 games. I came into work after my suspension a few days later, and someone said I should have been in on the peanut room heist. At least you could have made a few bucks. At another game, I witnessed a beer vendor confronted by a fan who was part of a group of Hell's Angels. Sometimes these angels can be surprisingly charming, but this one happened to be more of the stereotypical multi-tattooed, gigantic Igor type. He wasn't happy with the service, got upset, and proceeded to lift this vendor 2 feet into the air beer tray and all. Suddenly, a fellow angel grunted, "Hey, if you kill him, he can't get us any more beer." That brought Igor to his senses, and the frightened vendor was gently placed down, unharmed. You think dealing with the public is easy? Forget about it. Now, game takes on a personality of its own. And a Tuesday night crowd in June, for some unknown reason, could be cheap or generous. It was hard to tell until the first or second inning. Invariably, Red Sox and Oriole fans were always good customers, no matter what day it was. Usually Friday night fans were late, presumably stopping for a drink after getting their paychecks. Asian fans may buy out a whole section, but if any of them happened to buy a beer, they would usually sip it for the whole game, which, of course, is not good for business. In addition, though one might think these are stereotypes, it was often assumed Japanese fans don't tip, European fans also don't tip, and Met fans barely even buy. Vendor lingo is common. Hot dogs were often referred to as puppies. Cotton candy was called calories on a stick, and soda was known as sugar water. When a crowd was cheap, we vendors said the fans were waiting for the quarters. That referred to the fact that instead of telling us to keep the change, the customer hung around after paying for their item and were therefore waiting for the quarters. If an item was $5.75, for instance, that subway of a quarter, subway is what we called a tip, could add up on a busy night of vending. Now, one reason why I was able to recognize a cheap customer is I used to be one myself back in my day, climbing up to the grandstand as a fan, carrying my little paper bag with a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, an apple, and my notebook, saving me my quarter so I didn't spend it buying a scorecard. Now, one more thought. There was a great jazz pianist years ago named Earl Father Hines, who used to say, if you have holes in the bottom of your shoes, shine the tops. One night I was selling beer in the middle of a grueling 10-day homestand when a fellow vendor routinely called out, "Hey, Budweiser here, real beer." When I heard him make his call, I noticed something and I tapped him on the shoulder. "Dave, I hate to tell you, but you're selling Miller Lite tonight." With this newfound knowledge, he immediately called out, "Light beer from Miller, less calories here." I mentioned this because Dave, a bit fatigued from one game to the next, hadn't even checked to see which beer he was selling on this particular night. He had been extolling the virtues of Budweiser, which had been his product the previous game, and he was able to make the quick shift to pitch what he was currently serving, Miller Lite, once he became aware of it. Never doubt the ability of a good vendor to switch gears on the fly. Shining the tops. Now, April 17th, 1968, was one day at Shea Stadium that I will never forget. All one had to do was see Willie Mays play to know he was a special talent, the best of his day. He not only could hit for average, he could also hit with power, he could run, he could field, and he could throw. Those are the 5 essentials of a complete player. And in Willie's case, he did it with such enthusiasm and love for the game. It was quite simply a joy to watch him. Everything he did was exciting. Tallulah Bankhead once said, "There have been only 2 geniuses in the world, Willie Mays and Willie Shakespeare." In describing the very first home run Willie hit in 1951, his manager, Leo DeRocher, said, "I never saw a fucking ball leave a fucking park so fucking fast in my fucking life." Willie Mays was my boyhood idol. No fucking doubt about it. Now, this brisk April day back in 1968, I took the 7 train out to Queens with my 2 pals, Billy and Arnold. We hung out to get autographs after the game, of course, and to be honest, I don't even remember who won. What I definitely do remember is seeing Willie coming out of the press gate, a pack of kids trailing him as he headed to his pink Lincoln Continental, signing autographs all along the way. I immediately took off after him, but the crowd of people around the car was thick. Willie got in the passenger side, his driver started the engine, and the people began to peel off. But I was 12, hadn't a worry in the world, and didn't know or even care where Billy and Arnold were, so I clung to that Continental like a terrier to a milkman. Luckily, the traffic leaving the parking lot prevented Willie from exiting quickly. I waited patiently, and he continued to sign at his window for the group of us that had followed alongside his car. For me, that signature was gold. Upon coming back to Earth, I suddenly realized I got to tell the guys. So I scrambled across the parking lot, back near the press gate, till I breathlessly reached Billy and Arnold, who were waiting there to get other players' autographs. Whoa, guys, you won't believe it. Oh, look at this. Willie Mays. Oh, he signed my program. He signed my program. Boom. Those guys were off, flying to the edge of the parking lot, hunting down Willie's car. By the time they came back a few minutes later, after successfully meeting up with him, I was sitting at the curb, staring at my treasure, transfixed by my hero's beautiful penmanship. Mays still had an effect on me right into adulthood. When Reggie Jackson was retired and had a plaque dedicated to him in Monument Park in 2002, he was celebrated with Reggie Jackson Day at the stadium. For the occasion, he asked for and received Willie Mays as one of his personal guests for the event. I had a souvenir stand in the upper deck that day and wasn't aware he was going to be attending, but on Reggie's day, when I heard Willie's name over the loudspeaker, I ran straight out to the stands to see the great one once again. I had left my souvenirs completely unattended, thousands of dollars worth of stock vulnerable to theft. Just the mention of his name on the loudspeaker had me reacting like a kid again, the same way Billy and Arnold reacted back in 1968. Vroom! Now, I mentioned him earlier, so I don't want to leave without sharing a short Yogi story. Yogi Berra, of course, had some great lines attributed to him or about him. He famously used to say about a Midwest town, it gets later. Take two. About a Midwest town, he said, it gets late early out there. Or about a restaurant. Nobody goes there anymore. It's too crowded. When he was asked whether he preferred to be buried or cremated, his response was, surprise me. Now, as the story goes, one time he was in Chicago on a road trip during a very hot summer. On this particular day, he was in the team's hotel lobby wearing a white seersucker suit, the perfect outfit for the sticky, humid weather. The team owner's wife happened to be strolling through the lobby when she saw him, and she said, "Hi, Yogi. My, you look quite cool and comfortable in that suit in this weather." Yogi, quick on the trigger, replied, "You don't look so hot yourself."
Hello, everyone. I'm going to read you a couple of excerpts from my book, Music is Power, which is a history of socio-political music. First, we're going to start off with a piece about Syd Barrett and Pink Floyd. The theme of alienation reached full flower in Dark Side of the Moon. It became the longest charting album in history at an astronomical 917 weeks. It was also the apotheosis of post-Barrett Pink Floyd, a concept album driven not by narrative, but by the flow of songs that spoke to so many, because its lyrics dared to confront death, the rapid passage of time, consumerism, and of course, madness. Their piece Brain Damage had lyrics that could only be interpreted as shaped by Barrett's downfall. And if the band you're in starts playing different tunes, was both a nod to what had transpired within their group and how life's unpredictability could render one helpless. And within the piece as well was one of the simplest and yet most effectively terrifying depictions of mental disability ever recorded in song. You lock the door and throw away the key. There's someone in my head, but it's not me. The themes of mental health and depersonalization were furthered on the 1975 album Wish You Were Here. Its title cut applicable to many, as well as to Syd Barrett, not up to handling the cards dealt him. Cold comfort for change. Did you exchange a walk-on part in the war for a lead role in a cage? If it had been scripted, Barrett's last brush with his former bandmates could not have been more emotionally overwhelming. The group was finalizing the final mix on Shine On You Crazy Diamond in Studio 3 at Abbey Road. It was a song itself inspired by Barrett's mental dissolution. Remarkably, an overweight, lost figure with shaved head and eyebrows, wearing a gabardine raincoat, found his way into the studio, examining equipment. From the control room, Roger Waters got Rick Wright's attention. Do you know who that guy is? Think. It was Syd Barrett, who, despite his disengaged demeanor, asked if they were ready to have him add guitar lines to the song. Storm Thorgerson remembered that after the band had tea with Barrett and separated for the final time, both Waters and Gilmour were reduced to tears. The lyrics for Shine On You Crazy Diamond went farther than Pink Floyd's similarly themed works to both honor Barrett and rue his loss and possible self-destruction. You were caught on a crossfire of childhood and stardom, blown on the steel breeze. Come on, you target, for faraway laughter. Come on, you stranger, you legend, you martyr, and shine. It was another random occurrence that inspired the band's second greatest commercial success, although the group and most fans would just as soon forget about it. With their 1977 tour of Animals, Roger Waters was both in control of the songwriting and out of control during an incident in Montreal. As he told Dan Rather in a surprisingly in-depth and candid interview, I'm told that I spat on somebody who was trying to get up on the stage. And disgusted as I was by my actions, I thought about it deeply. To physically build a wall across the front of the stage while the concert's going on, just to demonstrate how much alienation there's potential for. Out of this emotional catharsis came one of the most physically imposing and theatrical daring ideas ever assembled for large arena rock. The Wall was not only the name of the next work, it was a symbol for a variety of ways humans are separated. The Wall was assembled for tours block by block, 160 feet wide by 30 feet tall. When fully constructed, it eventually set apart the group from the audience, culminating with the wall being toppled. With occasional writing help from David Gilmour and producer Bob Ezrin, Waters composited all the themes that he valued. To begin with, a protagonist named Pink Floyd was a symbol of the group's resentment of the commerciality and shallowness they encountered in the music industry. Their song, Have a Cigar, was inspired by one such meeting when an executive ignorantly asked, which one's pink? As for the guilt and shock of losing Barrett, It was represented by Pink's coming mental breakdown in the story. The song Comfortably Numb was inspired by a doctor injecting Waters during a pre-show stomach spasm. And within the concept album that is The Wall, it serves as a means of getting discombobulated Pink on stage as well. Still, it resonates on a deeper level with listeners because of its connection to youth and the crushing realities that accompany adulthood. Parenthetically, many consider Gilmour's 2 guitar solos on the cut to be among rock's finest. And it is on The Wall that Waters digs farther down into the well of his own experience. The cruelty of a headmaster at the Cambridgeshire High School for Boys who beat Waters with a cane contributed to Waters' anti-authoritarianism and in due course to the #1 hit song, Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2. The kids on the album chanting, "We don't need no thought control," in a sense, is youth asking the rulers and administrators of their world to consider humanism over dogma. As Waters told Rather, if one wants to live in a society where you have a political system that has anything to do with the needs or the wishes of the people, and their happiness as well, it behooves us to provide ourselves with an educated electorate. With 60 folk heroes like Baez, Dylan, Phil Oakes, and so many others, musical protestation about war was centered about Southeast Asia. But Britain suffered terribly due to Wernher von Braun's V2 Blitz, and the children of World War II England played not on swings, but in the rubble of former buildings. Roger Waters had an excruciatingly cruel past in regard to war. His grandfather, George Henry Waters, died in 1914 during World War I, when Roger Waters' father, Eric, was only 2 years old. Eric was a conscientious objector during the Second World War, but he changed his mind based on his revulsion for Hitler. Quote, "And he decided that his politics trumped his Christianity," Roger Waters admitted, because he was an objector on the grounds that he couldn't kill anybody because he was a Christian. Eric Waters became a lieutenant in the Royal Fusiliers, and a few weeks later, he was sent to Anzio, Italy, and killed in 1944. Roger Waters, who was a mere 5 months old, had lost both grandfather and father to war. So it is an heroic story, he said of his father's sacrifice, that attachment to belief. It's brave to be a conscientious objector. The multiple world tours of The Wall ran from 2010 to 2013. Waters also made reference to the tragedy of all wars in stagecraft. One version of the live presentation had a lighting design that projected the pictures of dead soldiers from many wars onto the cardboard bricks of the wall. A separation ensued after Waters in 1979 told Rick Wright to leave the band when personal problems lessened Wright's involvement. It created 2 Floydian entities. Gilmour and Mason toured with the name. Waters got to keep the concept and title of The Wall. It took Bob Geldof, star of the film version of The Wall, to bring back the warring parties in 2005 to play the Live Aid benefit in London. Despite the visible tension during their final bow, Waters called to a worldwide audience, "It's actually quite emotional standing up here with these 3 guys after all these years. Anyway, we're doing this for everyone who's not here, but particularly, of course, for Sid." The next year, Barrett died shortly after being diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. 2 years later, in 2008, Wright passed from an undisclosed form of cancer. While few expected another reunion of the existing members of Pink Floyd, Waters continues to speak out about social and political activism, as he lamented to Rather about the income inequality he has seen in the US under Donald Trump. Even the most disenfranchised, weakest member of society is the equal of the President of the United States and deserves to be treated with humanity and respect, and deserves to not have the safety net, such as it is, removed from under their feet. People with 2 jobs are sleeping in their cars because they cannot afford anywhere to live. This gets glossed over. And then I'd like to close with a reading from a chapter about the Dixie Chicks. But by and large, country was not rife with socio-political commentary, let alone anti-war compositions. It was the greatest of ironies that one of the biggest controversies to hit country music concerned the Dixie Chicks, the most successful female music group in history. They came up against the limitations of American free speech during military action, and not for something that was sung, but for something casually said overseas. In the run-up to the US invasion of Iraq, February 15 proved to be a historic day of protest, as between 6 and 11 million people around the world in 650 cities marched against the American intention to remove Saddam Hussein from power. He stood accused for the attacks of September 11, 2001, which had mostly been perpetrated by Saudi Arabian nationals, and for weapons of mass destruction, which were never definitively found. After the attacks on New York and Washington, D.C., the powerful conglomerate Clear Channel Communications, which owned hundreds of radio stations with 110 million listeners nationally, advised its program directors which songs were inappropriate to play in the aftermath of nearly 3,000 American deaths. Many were related to war, including War Pigs by Black Sabbath, or had associations of death or violence, Burning Down the House by the Talking Heads, Love is a Battlefield by Pat Benatar. Others among the 165 titles had no discernible troubling connotations, and in fact seemed comforting, including What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong, Bridge Over Troubled Waters by Simon and Garfunkel, and Obla Di Obla Da by the Beatles. Barbara Koppel, two-time Academy Award winner for the documentaries American Dream and Harlan County, USA, also directed Shut Up and Sing, an intimate look at the lives of the Dixie Chicks, Natalie Maines, Marty McGuire, and Emily Robeson, as they endured the fallout from a Maines comment about George W. Bush. Koppel communicated at length with the author and noted how the Clear Channel memorandum initiated the environment for a blacklist against the Chicks 2 years later. Quote, "They set a precedent that others can follow in the future. Had they suffered some kind of consequence for it, had they been fined or faced government hearings or the threat of their quasi-monopoly being broken up, then that might have righted the ship. That didn't happen. And today, as iHeartMedia, they are bigger than ever, reportedly owning 855 stations that reach 245 million people every month. So that tells them they should keep doing what they did, and it tells others to go ahead and do the same. And we have to consider what that has done and continues to do to free speech and how it affects how millions perceive free speech and their country. The offending incident was on a March 10 appearance at London's Shepherd's Bush Empire, 9 days before the bombing of Baghdad. In yet another historical irony, just prior to performing their hit, Travelin' Soldier, a sensitive ballad about a young man and the possibility of loving a woman he met briefly, destroyed by his death in Vietnam, Maines addressed an adoring crowd. The band knew that 90% of the English public was against America going to war. And on February 15, there were estimates of up to 1.5 million Brits in the streets of London. "Just so you know," Maines, an Austin resident, offered in solidarity with the audience, "we're on the good side of y'all. We don't want this war, this violence, and we're ashamed that the President of the United States is from Texas." When The Guardian reported the remark in its review, the Associated Press picked up the story, and the country music establishment and fans in the US went to war with the Chicks. The difference in the standards of discourse between America and Britain were breathtaking. During the February 15 London demonstrations, legendary playwright Harold Pinter told the crowd, and by association the United Kingdom, that America was, quote, a nation run by criminal lunatics, with Prime Minister Tony Blair as a hired Christian thug. Informed of the loathing her comment inspired, Maines apologized 2 days later on the web. But an ultra-right internet forum, freerepublic.com, fomented hate speech and a campaign to write to radio stations to ban the playing of the band's music. On March 20, the attack on Iraq began, and with 70% of Americans in favor of the military action, the Dixie Chicks found no relief from the ire of country music fans. Traveling Soldier was pulled from the playlists, and sales of the Home album were abruptly cut in half. Reminiscent of the Beatles fans publicly destroying vinyl after John Lennon's "bigger than Jesus" comment, Dixie Chicks fans crushed compact discs. Conservative TV talk show host Bill O'Reilly said, "They are callow, foolish women who deserve to be slapped around." In the current age of the Me Too movement, there might have been disciplinary measures against O'Reilly, but there were none at the time. In fact, the hysteria continued unabated. Garbage was dumped outside Robeson's Texas home. All three women required around-the-clock bodyguards. Death threats came in, and in one of the most powerful moments in Shut Up and Sing was when Maines was reading aloud the message, "Natalie Maines will be shot dead July 6th in Dallas, Texas." It's the people that have gone overboard, McGuire said in retrospect, and done such irrational things that take you back to the days of book burning. That is a real concern for me. Baghdad fell, chaos took over, and President George W. Bush made clear in a statement that he was in no way concerned with the safety of the Dixie Chicks, nor the repression of their right to free speech. They shouldn't have their feelings hurt just because some people don't want to buy their records. Freedom is a two-way street. The music industry did not mobilize en masse to support the Dixie Chicks, but statements were offered from Barbra Streisand, Madonna, and Bruce Springsteen. The biggest surprise, however, came from country star Merle Haggard. The same Associated Press that spread the wildfire of hostility reported that Haggard stated, "I don't even know the Dixie Chicks, but I find it an insult for all the men and women who fought and died in past wars when almost the majority of America jumped down their throats for voicing an opinion." It was like a verbal witch hunt and lynching. Koppel saw the response to the Dixie Chicks as a moral failure by the United States after the devastation of September 11 naturally enraged the population, but clouded its judgment. Quote, "Today, resistance is in vogue, but I think for a while after 9/11, there was an environment of fear and self-censorship. Opinion polls showed the president was extremely popular in his, quote, war on terror, at least initially. Music artists have to think about alienating their fans. There was a real feeling that people had to be unified in our response to terrorism. And so voices that questioned decisions being made by the White House were seen as weakening the war effort, giving aid to the enemy, all that nonsense." On May 1, Bush appeared on the deck of the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln in a flight suit with a huge banner reading, "Mission Accomplished," behind him. The Dixie Chicks, having had their apology rejected, saw no other alternative than to foster more discussion rather than accept their rejection. The May 2 cover of Entertainment Weekly showed the three women tastefully posed without clothes, but with slogans written on their bodies, including traitors, brave, free speech, and two epithets that they had already been called, Dixie's sluts and Sodom's angels. The feelings of shock from the betrayal of their country music fans were encapsulated by the moment in Shut Up and Sing, when Robeson, during a discussion of their future direction, murmured, "The people who banned us, I will never talk to them again." The Dixie Chicks changed their approach, and with the pop rock album Taking the Long Way, which featured their commentary on what had transpired and the resentments that lingered. Not Ready to Make Nice. At the emotional apex of that piece, Maine sang, "How in the world can the words that I said send somebody so over the edge that they'd write me a letter saying I better shut up and sing or my life will be over?" Took me about, I'd say, 100 listens, Maines admitted later, before I didn't get choked up. The appropriately named Accidents and Accusations Tour in 2006 supported an album that went gold in its first week and ascended to the top of the country charts, despite no airplay on country music stations. In June, the band returned to London. With a mischievous gleam in her eyes, Maine spoke to the audience. "Great to be back here at Shepherd's Bush, the return to the scene of the crime. Just so you know, we're ashamed the President of the United States is from Texas." The climate of censorship toward the Dixie Chicks spread, despite their success. An ad for Koppel's documentary was turned down by NBC in October. The reason cited was a policy barring ads that prompted, quote unquote, public controversy. The smaller CW network also refused to air spots for Shut Up and Sing, although local affiliates in New York and Los Angeles of all networks ignored the corporate proclamations and sold airtime. In February of 2007, at the Grammy Awards, the Dixie Chicks swept all 5 categories for which they were nominated, including Song of the Year and Album of the Year. But country music fans and stations refused to forgive Maines, despite the fact that time would reveal the invasion and occupation of Iraq as the worst foreign policy disaster in U.S. history. And on that cheerful note, I thank you all. Back to Todd.
Thank you, Brad. And thank you, Stewart. Stewart, come on back. I already have Dave Field with his hand up. And we have, so it's, Stewart actually says, I worked that fight in Norton. This is with regards to the Ali Norton fight in 1976. Stewart Zully was there. And Stewart, do you want to actually comment about that Ali Norton fight really quick?
I was there. Here it is in the book. Here's a picture of the program right here, Tom. Yeah, remember that fight because Ali was the champion, but I thought Norton won the fight. I think Norton always spoke about it, that he won the fight, but they gave it to Ali. They gave it to Ali. And I was a big Ali fan, but Norton was going at it. Norton was going at it, and I thought he beat him. But that was exciting. That was exciting.
Oh, thanks. Dave Field, you're up.
Hi, I have a question for each of these authors.
Yes.
Let me start first with Brad. I've read a couple of your books, and what it gets to me is the amount of research that goes into them. Who the hell does the research? Do you do it all? You can't do it all.
You think I make enough money to hire a researcher, huh, Dave?
Oh my God, who
No.
does it?
I do it, and it's a joy. You read everything on the topic. The important thing is deciding, as with Music is Power, what groups you want to write about. And then what songs you want to write about. You drill down. And then once you choose the socio-political songs, you read everything that you can find. One little neat hint, and this is for anybody, if you have an LA Public Library card, you can go online and you can read dozens of magazines, both published here and abroad, about music. So you spend a lot of time, and finally the tough part, you have to stop researching and you got to start writing. That's the hard part.
Okay, thank you. Stewart,
Yes,
has
sir.
anybody ever said to you, you look and sound and deliver like Bill Maher?
I have heard that actually. Yeah.
Yeah,
Bill Maher.
I got that feeling as I was watching it. Who does he remind me of? and then it clicked.
I used to, actually, they used to say I was like a young Walter Matthau,
Yeah.
but now I'm becoming an old Walter Matthau.
Well,
Funny.
thank you.
All right. Cool. Thanks, Dave. Stu Berg. Stu, just unmute yourself and you are good to go.
Yeah. Berg in the house.
First of all, guys,
There you go.
really, it was a lovely way to spend an hour. I have to really compliment both of you. I thought I was one of the world's greatest sports fans, Stu, but next to you, I'm like, a country singer and Frank Sinatra. You just absolutely was great. And and the information that you've compiled on Brad and the research that you had to do was really, really special. And thank you. I want to thank you guys for giving me a really pleasant hour. And good work.
Thanks.
Thank
you for being out there and listening to us. We appreciate it.
Where else am I going to be?
You're stuck.
But I'd be here anyway.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Stu. Elaine. Elaine, just unmute yourself. Elaine, I'm going to see if I can unmute you. Elaine Madsen. Hello, Elaine.
Am I the only one?
Elaine. All right, Elaine, I'm keeping you. I'm keeping you. You've been activated. So when you come back,
In the bullpen.
Yes, you're in the bullpen, exactly. So in the meantime, we're going to Mitch Levine.
Hey guys.
Hey, Mitch.
Hey. So what wonderful readings and what a pleasant diversion from the times we live in and an alternative to so many of the presentations we, including me, often create. I loved it. Stu, I've seen your theatrical version of this and read the book and really love it. Brad, it's correct me if I'm wrong, because I thought I heard you denigrate animals as you were going through the Floyd discography, and I was wondering if that's what you did or if I misheard.
I would never be cruel to animals. That's not true at all. No, I didn't denigrate animals. I was just talking about something that happened when that album was being recorded.
Oh, I see. Because I think it's a pretty spectacular work of art, and it's an interesting leap from which you were here to the wall. I mean, I think it was necessary to get to the wall from what had come before.
Yeah, and the rest of that chapter, actually before what I read, I talk about Syd Barrett, who, well, he basically founded the group,
Sure.
took too much LSD, basically had a mental breakdown, and all the charming little English songs that he wrote disappeared, and Pink Floyd started writing these phenomenal sociopolitical songs about alienation, madness, and so forth. It's kind of bizarre.
And do you think that, one interesting figure in the Pink Floyd history is Alan Parsons, and he gets short shrift often, the producer of so many of their great albums, for creating that sound that became recognized as what Pink Floyd became.
Yeah, there's a VH1 documentary, Mitch, that is great and talks about Parsons. It actually has him interviewed. And also Joe Boyd, who I interviewed, he was in London. He basically managed the group. He's got them started in London, and then they basically submarined him. They took the band away from him with the lure of money. But it was Joe Boyd who put them on the map at the UFO Club and the Marquee Club in London.
I'll tell just a very quick story, and then I'll let someone else talk. One of the most mind-blowing, literally, experiences of my life is I had backstage passes to Pink Floyd at Earl's Court in London, and it was for the Division Bell tour, so no Roger Waters. But as I'm about to walk into the green room from the darkened stage, framed in the doorway entering the green room is the most extraordinary two people in conversation I'd ever seen, which were Dave Gilmour and Stephen Hawking. Having this conversation about the concert that had just transpired. Hawking, of course, with his artificial voice, and Gilmour. And it was, that completed the amazing trip I had been on that night.
Wow.
I love knowing that Stephen Hawking was a Floyd fan. I think that's great.
For sure. Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks, Mitch. Michael Kavanaugh.
Good evening, and thank you both very much. It was just a great joy to hear you talk about things that you're so knowledgeable about. Incidentally, Bill Maher is coming back on TV tonight.
Oh,
In case you didn't know. So you can enjoy that as always. The other thing, I also saw a great fight one time. Saw Rocky Marciano, believe it or not, in San Francisco fight Don Cockell. And I was not seated close to the ring, but from where I was, I could hear the punches land. And I don't know if you had that experience when you saw the Ali fight. Could you actually hear the blows?
well, what happened was I was right at ringside until it started. Then they kicked me out, because everybody down there paid the big bucks and they didn't want to see a hot dog vendor in the way. I was selling hot dogs. I actually sold a hot dog to Jimmy Connors that night, I remember. But he was down in those great seats. But then I went to one level up in the loge level and had a great view. But I don't remember hearing the gloves. But everybody was cheering and yelling and whatnot, and it was a great fight. It went the distance, and it was exciting. I mentioned in the book that my dad used to work some of those old fights. It wasn't Jack Dempsey, but some other guy, Joe Louis. Joe Louis used to play in fight in Yankee Stadium. I mean, that was the place, and so it was known for those prize fights. And it was exciting to be there. It was exciting to be there for sure.
This was Kezar Stadium in San Francisco, so it was another big, huge football
And
stadium.
I'll bet Rocky Marciano won.
Oh dear. Well, of course, he never lost a fight.
I
But
know.
I mean, it was an obliteration. It was even in my memory of many years ago, it was a stunning example of pugilism at its highest.
And those that don't know, Rocky Marciano never lost a fight.
49-0.
Undefeated.
My question, Stewart, is when you were in your 40 years, how were you, what sections and how did you get your sections each night or was it put out by the powers that be or?
No, it was seniority. We were all union vendors. And if you worked there after 3 years, you became a union vendor. And then when you would come in, on your card, you would write choices, like beer behind home plate, beer by first base. Beer was good. And then, or hot dogs, and you'd go down the list. So the guys who were ahead of me got their first choice, and then it would drop down to me, and then people behind me. What was interesting is because I'm also an actor, sometimes I would have an acting job, sometimes. And so the hot dog guy would move up to my beer slot. So it was, they were all rooting for me to get a TV series because everybody moved up. So the peanut guy moved to hot dogs moved to beer, and I had a job on Law and Order. So that's how it works.
Did you get a particular section and you had that section for a while?
It varied, but yeah, I was always, this is in the old stadium. I usually, when I had food before I switched to souvenirs, yeah, I was most of the time I was downstairs, but I really worked everywhere. You start out, I started at New York Giant football games back in 1970, and I sold hot chocolate, had a big, a thing on my back, pouring the hot chocolate, and I sold peanuts, and that's how I first started. And then you kind of work your way up. You go from, you have Cracker Jacks, you have peanuts. I used to sell licorice, which was not good. And I sold popcorn. And I mentioned it in the book. I sold egg rolls. We had pizza. We had little slices of pizza in a box. They tried a lot of different items. And I sold.
That was after the Y.A. Tittle era, right?
Yeah, that was Fran Tarkenton and Tucker Fredrickson and those guys.
Right. Thank you both. It was just really enjoyable.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Get your egg roll. Get your egg roll. Just doesn't have the same ring.
Oh, it did not. And if you forgot the duck sauce, oh man.
Oh, funny. Lisa Robbins.
Yeah. Wow. Todd, thank you so much for presenting these teasers of these two books that I want to read. And I missed both of your guys' full-on presentation. So Stewart, are you planning to do your, your acting version of this again?
Well, no, not an acting version, but what I do is every 2 weeks, I do some selections from the book. So they're called innings. So I've done 6 innings so far. So actually a week from Saturday is the 7th inning, and I do different selections from the book. It's kind of fun. And I'm going to go to 9 innings. And if I go to extra innings, maybe I'll go to extra innings. I don't know.
Fantastic. Well, I just wanted to tell you, you're really not pretty ugly. So I'm going to have to dispute you there. And I loved your stories, particularly the one about the competing stadiums with the Pope. Oh, the sun coming out. Yeah, that was so great. And gosh, Brad, I so wanted to see your book Soup presentation. And I'm so happy to get some of the content in your book, and it just makes me so proud to be a music lover artist, and the role that we play, and thank you for doing such an amazingly written and thorough investigation, starting with one of my favorites, today with the Pink Floyd deep dive, into all that material, and now I'm like loving the Dixie Chicks, and I just really thank you for exposing them. And with regards to Bill Maher, I remember during that same period of time, him getting booted off for just being Bill Maher, for just acting like he always acts. And all of a sudden his show was gone, so I don't know.
Right. That's
really proud to be an artist.
Todd, Lisa mentioned that she wanted to read the full book. This might be a good time to say how she can get a copy of it.
Well, Stewart, why don't you tell everybody how she can get
it? Well, the book, of course, is available on Amazon, because everything is available on Amazon, and it's available at Barnes and Noble. But this weekend, if you go to stewartjzully.com, I'll send an autographed copy, and 20% of that will go towards smartphone theater, because Todd is doing a great job here.
Yay!
So that's at stewartjzully.com, and then just navigate it in there. I don't know how to do it, but hopefully you do.
Books here. Get your books here. Here you go. Books here.
That's a really nice offer, Stewart. And I'm going to have to do something special. Like if anybody orders my book from Amazon, I'm going to send you either Pink Floyd or Dixie Chicks MP3s in email.
Nice.
That's great.
Something.
Wow.
I love that. I love that. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And just so everybody knows, we also, we always live stream. So every week we're always on Facebook, Smartphone Theater. We live stream on Facebook, Smartphone Theater. And you can also get the link off of for every week, we can always get the link off of the website, smartphonetheater.com. It's always there just in case. And I do my utmost to make sure that everybody has it. We have a great mailing list and a growing mailing list. But for those that we miss, or if you have friends, just send them to the webpage, and we're always good to go. Gina Acosta, hello.
Gina.
Men, gentlemen.
Where?
First of all, on behalf of Greg and I, 2 of the most essential things we need right now are music and fucking baseball. We need both of these things, and to be able to hear more in-depth approach to Brad's book, which we were able to come out and see at when we were able to come out and see at Book Soup, and bought the book, and that was just so wonderful. Brad, I love your cabiny kind of environment that you have to let us back into that world. And then Stewart with just baseball, sir. Baseball, baseball, baseball. So I just can't thank you enough on behalf of both of us for bringing us the essentials that we need right now. And it was such a wonderful pleasure to hear both of you. And I'm just such a deep, true fan of both of your work. And holy cow, thank you. So let's keep bringing this to it. So, but music memory and baseball memory, those are two of my essentials. I can't speak for anyone else, but thank you so, so much.
So Gina, the question is that at the afternoon, you get tickets to a show that you really want to see, and you get tickets to a Dodger game that you really want to go to. Where do you go? Where do you turn?
As long as those Dodgers are fucking trouncing the Astros, I'm going to a Dodger game. If it comes down to sitting back and supporting a more intellectual, cerebral portion, I'm into the fight, but you know, I gotta say, being out at a baseball game right now with some amazing music on my shoulder, a little old school shoulder music, man, I mean, music and baseball right now are sort of the two lifebloods. So it's difficult to separate all of that, but to be at a game right now, but fucking go Dodgers safely. If we got to shut this thing down, I'm all for it. I know that we swept the Astros 2-0. Thank you so much. And I'm going to start listening to more Pink Floyd because Brad has like put me into that. So I you know, and I am an auxiliary Yankee fan along with all.
Oh, good.
I totally dig the Yankees. I totally dig them. But I'm just so happy that both of you guys have brought your books out, and I'm a huge supporter. Greg and I both are, so.
Thank you.
You really are. I remember you coming out to Book Soup, and it meant a lot to me. And, you know, here's a suggestion, Gina. Just bring your iPod to the Dodger game.
Okay.
Socially distance, but you know, listen to the Dixie Chicks while we're trouncing those cheating assholes.
I can do that, Brad. I can totally do that. So I am absolutely such a huge fan of your book, Brad. And it was such a pleasure to come out and see you and then suddenly have Todd pop up as the photographer on site. It's like, hey, Todd. And then as always, to be on site with Stewart when we got baseball going with Stewart. So I'm a huge, huge baseball crazy person and a massive, massive music person. So thank you both for doing this tonight.
No, I mentioned that I worked Pink Floyd at Pink Floyd. They have a concert at Yankee Stadium. It was 1994, and I was selling T-shirts like crazy. It is like, you know, throwing fish to the dolphins in SeaWorld. You know, it's just amazing. It's amazing. They're 3 deep, and I'm just running around, and I love Pink Floyd.
David Gilmour. I mean, I must say, I'm gonna confess something. That as a high school girl, David Gilmour's Bedroom Eyes like slayed me. I was kind of done. When it was comfortably numb, I'm like, give me those eyes. I'm going to be comfortably numb.
Dark Side of the Moon for Gina.
All right. Thanks, Gina.
Thank
So,
you.
thank you, gentlemen, so much. Thank you guys so much. It was such a pleasure.
Great.
Thanks for the support.
You know, I mentioned this to Brad, but last year they actually screened The Wall at the Annenberg Space for Photography. They did a late night showing, and it was amazing. I had never seen it before, and what a film! What an amazing film.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys, we went long, so but everybody was having such a good time, so why not? And I think we have a couple comments. Lisa Richards says, "Wonderful! I so enjoyed it. Thank you, Lisa." And same with Jonathan Levitt. And it looks like we don't have any more questions. So I'm going to say, does anybody else, do you guys want any parting words? Go Yankees, go Dodgers, go Orioles.
No, just go smartphone theater. Keep going.
Thank you.
We need it. For those of you who haven't been here before, you know, if you go on the website, you could see everything that Todd has been able to produce. One acts, full lengths that are split up, one act from one week and then the next week. And then today he was kind enough to let us come and read from our books. And so keep it up. Who knows? Next week we might hear a jazz trio. I don't know.
It's possible. It's possible. Yeah, it was such a pleasure. So thank you guys. That was wonderful.
We really did.
All right.
Thank you for doing it, Todd.
And speaking of which, Brad and Stewart, I'm going to send you guys a quick link as soon as we wrap up, just to sort of like a post-show toast. That we do a virtual toast. And I hope everybody cracked open a cold one during Stewart's talk reading.
Hang on. Don't forget.
All right, guys. Hey, thank you, everybody. Jonathan, have a great weekend as well. And great. Thanks, everybody, for coming. We'll see you next week.
Okay.
And both of you guys, it was a great evening. So
thank you.
thank you, guys.
Brad.
See you later.
Take
Bye,
care.
everybody. Drive home carefully.
Okay.
Bye.